Imagine standing on the edge of a rugby field, the crowd's roar rising in your ears as you prepare for the fight of your life. You're about to engage in a battle of strength, strategy, and raw emotion, a game that demands not just your physical power but your mental resilience, too. The stakes are high, the pressure unrelenting. But what if everything you thought you knew about rugby, about the sport, about the men who play it, and about yourself, wasn't as it seemed? In Loose Head, Confessions of an Unprofessional Rugby Player, Joe Marler invites you to step into his world, where the line between glory and chaos blurs and the true cost of the game is revealed, not just in bruises, but in the battles that rage inside. This isn't your typical sports memoir. This isn't a glorified story of triumph and hard-won success. No, Loose Head is something entirely different, refreshingly honest, hilariously irreverent, and unflinchingly raw. It's a journey through the ups and downs of professional rugby, but also through the highs and lows of self-discovery, mental health struggles, and the power of being unapologetically yourself. Joe Marler isn't your average rugby player. Known as much for his unpredictable nature and unfiltered personality as his formidable skills on the pitch, he has spent his career navigating the wild world of elite rugby, all while questioning everything about the game, his place in it, and the expectations that come with fame. Marler has been called everything from a national hero to a loose cannon, but in this book, he strips away the labels and gives us the truth, the unvarnished, sometimes uncomfortable, but always real truth. Whether you're a diehard rugby fan or someone who's never picked up a ball, Loose Head promises to take you on an unforgettable ride through the eyes of a man who's lived every moment of it, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, but always living it to the fullest. This book isn't about glorifying the sport. It's about understanding the price of being in the spotlight, the pressure of professional performance, and the toll it takes on one's mind and body. Marler's journey is one of humor, humility, and honesty. He pulls back the curtain on the rugby world, exposing its fierce competitive nature, its often absurd culture, and the unspoken battles players face both on and off the field. Through his distinctive voice, one that's self-deprecating, candid, and often cheeky, Marler not only recounts the memorable moments of his career but also delves deep into the more personal aspects of his life. His struggles with mental health, his fight against the weight of expectations, and his attempts to reconcile the person he is with the persona the public demands. In Loose Head, you'll discover the truth behind Marler's controversial moments, laugh at the absurdity of the rugby world, and maybe even shed a tear or two as you come to understand the man behind the headlines. But most importantly, you'll be reminded that, at the heart of it all, we're all just trying to figure out who we are, how we fit into this crazy world, and how we can leave a mark without losing ourselves in the process. So, as you settle in for this wild ride, prepare to get an inside look at the life of a rugby player who's never been afraid to challenge the status quo, who's never been content with being anyone other than himself. With every page you turn, you'll find yourself not just gaining insight into the world of professional rugby, but discovering the power of embracing your true self, flaws and all. This is Joe Marler's story, one of unfiltered chaos, laughter, and resilience. And it's a story that's far more than just about rugby. It's about being human. Chapter 1. The Early Days, From Ashford to Rugby. The opening chapter of Loose Head takes readers back to Joe Marler's childhood. Born in Ashford, a town in Kent, Marler grew up in a working-class family where rugby was more of a background sport than the focus of his life. It wasn't until his teenage years that rugby started to play a more significant role, thanks to the encouragement of a few influential figures in his life. Marler recounts his time at school, where he wasn't exactly the stereotypical rugby-playing prodigy. What makes this chapter so relatable is Marler's candidness. He shares that, much like most young athletes, he didn't initially see rugby as his destiny. He was just a kid playing because his friends were doing it, and it was fun. But rugby started to find him, eventually leading him to trials for professional youth teams. Marler's irreverent humor shines as he describes his awkward, gangly phase, setting the tone for the rest of the memoir. Despite not being a natural rugby player, Joe quickly realized he had a talent for scrummaging. However, he wasn't always well received by his coaches. His rebellious streak and lack of polish didn't sit well with some of the more traditional figures in the rugby world. But as we learn in this chapter, Joe Marler's story isn't one of natural talent overcoming adversity. It's about an unrelenting willingness to be himself, no matter what. Chapter 2: Learning the Trade, the Early Professional Years. In the second chapter, Marler delves into his early days as a professional rugby player. He discusses the challenges of breaking into the elite world of professional rugby, including his time at Harlequins, a top-tier English club. One of the most fascinating parts of this chapter is Marler's reflection on the pressure to conform in the professional rugby world. He talks about how rugby, much like other elite sports, has a culture that often expects players to fit a certain mold. Marler admits he struggled to fit in with the tough guy persona that rugby culture typically celebrates. This chapter offers a compelling view into Marler's evolution as a player. While many of his teammates were already hardened professionals, Marler was still finding his footing. Yet, his honesty and vulnerability about his insecurities, his battles with body image, and his struggles with mental health make this a powerful section of the book. He also shares anecdotes about the intense training regimes and the physical toll the sport takes on athletes, making readers appreciate the true cost of professional rugby beyond the victories and glory. Chapter 3: Scrumming and Growing Pains. In this chapter, Marler discusses his specific role as a prop, an often thankless and physically demanding position in rugby. He delves deep into the intricacies of scrummaging, explaining what it takes to succeed at such a grueling aspect of the game. While many casual fans may not fully appreciate the significance of scrums, Marler takes the time to explain their importance and why mastering them is crucial for success on the field. The chapter is peppered with both technical insights and humorous commentary. Marler is never one to shy away from making fun of himself or the sport's more absurd aspects. As much as he's passionate about rugby, his self-deprecating humor ensures the tone remains lighthearted. He recalls early scrummaging mishaps and how he learned from his mistakes, especially the key lessons in patience, perseverance, and humility. This chapter also introduces us to some of the colorful personalities in rugby, offering a behind-the-scenes look at team dynamics. Chapter 4: The Mental Battle, Coping with Pressure and Expectations. This chapter takes a more somber tone as Marler opens up about the mental health challenges he faced during his career. Despite being a successful professional, Marler found himself grappling with anxiety, depression, and imposter syndrome. His vulnerability in discussing these issues is one of the most powerful aspects of the memoir. Marler shares his experiences of feeling overwhelmed by the expectations placed on him, both as a player and as a public figure. He talks about the pressure to always be on in front of fans, sponsors, and the media, and how this constant performance took a toll on his mental well-being. What stands out is how Marler challenges the stereotype of the tough rugby player, who is invincible and impervious to mental health struggles. His honest reflections on seeking therapy and navigating his mental health in a hypermasculine sport make this chapter resonate with anyone who has faced their own struggles in silence. Chapter 5: The Weird World of Rugby Tours. Marler's candidness continues in Chapter 5, where he takes us on a humorous yet eye-opening journey through the bizarre world of rugby tours. The camaraderie and chaos of being on tour with teammates are some of the best moments in the book, with Marler sharing stories that range from the downright absurd to the surprisingly poignant. From the pranks and team bonding activities to the strange rituals and behaviors that emerge when rugby players are away from home for weeks on end, this chapter offers a behind-the-scenes look at the off-field experiences of professional players. Marler's storytelling skills are on full display here, with tales of locker room antics, late-night conversations, and the unpredictable nature of life on the road. However, Beneath the humor, Marler also hints at the isolation that comes with being away from home for extended periods and the toll that traveling so frequently can take on personal relationships. It's a mix of fun and fatigue, a balance that professional athletes have to navigate regularly. Chapter 6: Facing the Press: The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Joe Marler is no stranger to controversy, and in this chapter, he takes a deep dive into the world of media scrutiny. He reflects on his own interactions with the press, including his infamous public outbursts, and offers insights into how the media can shape a player's public image, often for better or for worse. Marler talks about his experiences with media training, which often felt more like an attempt to sanitize his personality than a genuine effort to help him communicate better. He's not afraid to criticize the toxic side of media culture, where players are often treated as commodities rather than people. The chapter also touches on Marler's own relationship with fame, which he never fully embraced. He's more interested in being himself, warts and all, rather than living up to the idealized version of what a rugby star should be. The chapter is filled with witty commentary on the absurdity of some media narratives, as well as thoughtful reflections on how athletes can maintain their authenticity in a world that often demands conformity. Chapter 7: Rivalries and Friendships. Rugby is a brutal sport, but it's also a sport built on friendships and rivalries. In this chapter, Marler explores the unique relationships that form between teammates, opponents, and coaches. He recounts some of his fiercest rivalries on the pitch, including encounters with players who pushed him to be better, both physically and mentally. What makes this chapter stand out is how Marler portrays the paradox of rugby, the intense competition during the game and the deep camaraderie off the pitch. He talks about the importance of trust and respect in a team environment and how some of the strongest bonds can form in the heat of battle. He also reflects on the ways in which friendships with teammates can transcend the sport itself, creating lifelong connections that extend well beyond the final whistle. Chapter 8: The End of the Road: Retirement and Reflection. In this chapter of Loose Head, Marler confronts the inevitable: retirement. After a career full of highs and lows, he discusses the emotional roller coaster of stepping away from professional rugby. Marler shares the difficulties of transitioning from being an elite athlete to finding a new purpose. The end of his playing days wasn't just about physical change, it was a mental and emotional shift as well. Marler reflects on the legacy he hopes to leave behind, not just as a rugby player but as someone who challenged the norms of the sport and embraced his true self. He also touches on the idea of using his platform to speak out about issues that matter to him, such as mental health and the importance of being true to one's identity. Chapter 9: The Physical Toll: Blood, Sweat, and Tears. In this chapter, Marler takes a deeper dive into the brutal physical demands of professional rugby, a sport known for its violent collisions and grueling physicality. Marler openly discusses the injuries, pain, and sacrifices that come with being a top-level rugby player, providing an unflinching look at the toll the sport takes on the body. The chapter doesn't shy away from the graphic reality of life as a prop, a position that involves intense physical combat in every match. Marler shares stories of injuries, from the everyday knocks to more serious issues, like broken bones and concussions. The pain and the recovery process are exhausting, and the fact that players are expected to keep pushing forward, sometimes with limited recovery time, creates a culture where injuries are often ignored or downplayed. One of the standout moments in this chapter is when Marler talks about his battle with chronic pain and how the physical demands of rugby took a toll on his mental health. He reflects on how difficult it was to reconcile the need to push through the pain with the understanding that his body had limits. The chapter serves as a reminder of the cost of glory, the enduring injuries that often aren't fully appreciated by fans and outsiders who only see the highlights on the field. Marler's raw honesty about the physical side of his career is not only enlightening for readers, but also highlights the resilience required to continue playing at such a high level despite the physical cost. This chapter also draws attention to how athletes face decisions about their health, sometimes pushing past their own well-being in the name of competition and success. Chapter 10. The Weight of Expectations, Living Up to the Hype. Marler delves into the pressure of being in the spotlight in Chapter 10, discussing the weight of expectations placed on athletes, both on and off the field. From a young age, Marler felt the burden of being a professional player, expected to perform at his best every time he stepped onto the pitch. Whether it was from his coaches, his teammates, the fans, or the media, there was a constant need to live up to an ideal image of what a rugby player should be. Marler recalls the early days of his career when he wasn't sure if he was good enough or if he even truly belonged in the team. His imposter syndrome looms large in these reflections, and it's clear that the constant battle to prove himself, to justify his position, and to fit in with a team of hardened professionals weighed heavily on him. Yet, despite the overwhelming nature of this pressure, Marler also begins to realize that part of the key to his success lies in embracing his authentic self, even if that meant challenging the traditional mold of the rugby player. He speaks candidly about his struggles with confidence and how, over time, he learned to accept that he didn't have to conform to the idealized, tough persona that rugby culture often demands. Marler emphasizes how athletes are expected to constantly show their worth, to prove themselves in every match. The idea that a player's worth is tied solely to their performance on the field is a central theme in this chapter. He also discusses how this pressure can lead to burnout, and how rugby players are often forced to confront their mental and emotional limits in ways that outsiders might not fully understand. Chapter 11. The Social Media Age, Fame, Criticism, and the Digital World. As a player who gained significant media attention, Marler addresses the impact of social media and its influence on modern athletes. In this chapter, he shares his thoughts on the double-edged sword of social media fame, the ability to connect with fans and followers, but also the pressure of constant public scrutiny. Marler talks about his own experience with online criticism and the way social media allows people to hide behind screens while they hurl judgment, often without understanding the full context. He recalls some of the more uncomfortable moments, such as receiving harsh comments about his performance or appearance, and how difficult it could be to separate his identity from his public persona. This chapter gives a candid look at the mental strain that comes with being an athlete in the digital age, where everything is amplified. Marler talks about the challenge of dealing with negativity online while trying to maintain a sense of self. He reflects on the importance of taking breaks from social media to protect his mental health and offers advice on how athletes can navigate the pressures of public opinion in the age of Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms. Marler also touches on the positive sides of social media, such as the ability to share moments of joy, connect with fans, and showcase his personality outside of rugby. It's a fascinating exploration of how athletes can leverage their presence in the digital world while still maintaining their sanity and authenticity. Chapter 12. Controversies and Comedic Gold, Joe Marler in the Spotlight. Throughout his career, Marler has found himself at the center of controversy, whether it was his outspoken nature, his eccentric on-field antics, or his public outbursts. This chapter takes a closer look at some of those controversial moments that have made Marler one of the more divisive figures in rugby. Marler doesn't shy away from his mistakes and missteps. He talks about a particularly infamous incident in which he was caught on camera making an inappropriate comment to an opposing player, which led to public backlash and disciplinary actions. What's notable in this chapter is Marler's ability to own his mistakes with humor, taking responsibility without making excuses, but also poking fun at himself in the process. While some might have seen these controversies as detrimental to his career, Marler uses them as learning experiences. He shares how he learned to navigate the fine line between being authentic and crossing boundaries, and how sometimes humor and self-deprecation were his way of dealing with the immense pressures of professional sport. Marler's ability to turn controversies into comedic gold is a significant part of his public image. This chapter highlights his unique blend of self-awareness and humor, as he reflects on how these moments have shaped him into the player and person he is today. Chapter 13. Life After Rugby, transitioning to the next phase. In this chapter, Marler reflects on life beyond professional rugby, the inevitable transition from being an active player to figuring out what comes next. After his playing career ended, Marler had to navigate the uncertainty of a new phase of life, which many retired athletes struggle with. Marler shares how he initially struggled with the lack of structure and purpose that came with life after rugby. He reflects on the emotional void left by retirement, the loss of camaraderie, the routine of training, and the constant adrenaline rush of competition. But over time, Marler began to see this phase not as an end, but as an opportunity for growth and reinvention. The chapter focuses on how retirement from sport is not just about leaving the game, but about finding new identities and passions. Marler shares how he started to explore different interests outside of rugby, including media work and public speaking, while also finding ways to support causes that mattered to him. One of the most poignant parts of this chapter is Marler's exploration of the pressure athletes face to quickly reinvent themselves after retiring and how it's okay to take time to figure things out. He also shares his growing interest in mental health advocacy, using his platform to help reduce the stigma around mental health issues in the world of sport. It's a reflection of how Marler has evolved from the young, brash player to someone who is more thoughtful about his impact on others, both on and off the field. Chapter 14, Full Circle, The Legacy of Joe Marler. In the final chapter of the book, Marler reflects on the legacy he hopes to leave behind. He isn't interested in being remembered as the best player ever, but rather as someone who broke the mold, a player who is authentic, imperfect, and unapologetic about who he was. Marler shares his thoughts on how he wants to be remembered by his teammates, fans, and the rugby community. He reflects on the values that mattered most to him: integrity, humor, and a commitment to being himself, no matter the circumstances. In his view, rugby wasn't just about winning trophies, but about creating a space for players to be honest, vulnerable, and human. The final pages of the book are a call to arms for athletes and fans alike to be more compassionate and open-minded, to appreciate not just the victories, but the journey of the player. Marler leaves readers with a message that echoes throughout his memoir. Life, like rugby, is messy and unpredictable, but it's all part of the experience. Conclusion. In Loose Head, Confessions of a Nun, Professional Rugby Player, Joe Marler delivers an unfiltered, raw, and often hilarious account of his journey through the high-pressure world of professional rugby. But as the pages wind down, Marler's story morphs from a mere recounting of locker room antics and game day drama into something far deeper and more profound. What started as a memoir about a larger-than-life personality in a brutal sport evolves into a reflection on vulnerability, self-discovery, and the powerful human side of the game. From the very first page, Marler's wit and self-deprecating humor draw the reader in, but it's the authenticity of his voice that holds them captive. He doesn't just tell the story of his triumphs and failures on the rugby field. He unveils the inner workings of a mind that grapples with the pressures of fame, identity, and mental health. What makes this book stand out is its willingness to tackle the unsung struggles that many athletes face, yet few have the courage to voice. Marler doesn't just lay bare his struggles with anxiety and self-doubt. He does so with a vulnerability that is both rare and necessary in the sports world. By the end of Loose Head, it's clear that Marler's journey is not just about rugby. It's about the human condition. His story isn't just a personal confession. It's a collective reckoning with the world's expectations of athletes and the toll that relentless performance takes on the body and mind. Rugby, for Marler, is a metaphor for life itself, a constant battle against forces beyond one's control, punctuated by moments of unexpected triumph and brutal failure. But even in those moments of pain and disappointment, Marler finds humor, perspective, and ultimately, growth. One of the most striking aspects of Marler's memoir is how he humanizes the sport of rugby, a game often characterized by its toughness, grit, and machismo. By stripping away the glorified image of the warrior athlete, Marler invites readers into the quieter, more intimate moments of his life, a life full of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and a continual search for self-acceptance. His vulnerability opens up a new conversation about masculinity in sport, about the importance of acknowledging weaknesses, embracing mental health challenges, and redefining what it means to be strong. Throughout the book, Marler reflects on the absurdities and challenges of being a professional rugby player. The locker room banter, the unrelenting pressure to perform, and the absurd rituals of team life are all captured with Marler's characteristic humor and irreverence. But as we reach the final chapters, we see that these anecdotes are more than just comic relief. They serve as a vehicle for understanding the complexities of life as a public figure. Marler's candidness about his mental health battles, his difficulties with fame, and his eventual path towards self-acceptance is a reminder that even the most seemingly invincible athletes are human too. What makes Loose Head so compelling is the way Marler reframes the narrative around professional athletes. He shows that behind the headlines, the match reports, and the social media posts lies a person who struggles with the same insecurities, fears, and vulnerabilities as anyone else. His decision to talk openly about his mental health challenges isn't just brave, it's a necessary act in breaking down the stigmas that surround mental health in sports. In the final pages, as Marler reflects on his career and the legacy he hopes to leave, it becomes evident that the true measure of success is not the number of caps earned or the accolades amassed, but the relationships forged, the lessons learned, and the personal growth achieved along the way. His career may have been defined by bruising tackles and hard-won victories, but it is the softer, more introspective moments that define his journey. Through his candid confessions, Marler inspires readers to find strength not just in their victories, but in their struggles and imperfections as well. Ultimately, Loose Head is not just the story of a rugby player. It is the story of a man who has learned to embrace his flaws, confront his demons, and redefine what it means to be truly professional. Marler's journey reminds us that success in any field is not about perfection or meeting external expectations, but about embracing one's authentic self and accepting the messy, imperfect reality of being human. As the book closes, Marler's story leaves us with a powerful and inspiring message. Vulnerability is not a weakness, but a strength. It is through our struggles, our challenges, and our willingness to be honest with ourselves that we find our true power. By the end of Loose Head, the reader is left with more than just a deeper understanding of Joe Marler as a rugby player. They are left with a deeper understanding of what it means to be human in an often unforgiving world. And in that understanding, we find the courage to be more than just the roles we play, but the people we are. Thanks for listening. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new video updates. Happy learning!